Hi there, and welcome to Ariadne's Thread. I'm Ariadne, and this podcast is all about waking up to a spiritual life and navigating the chaos that comes along with it. Today I want to talk about silence and how it is key to understanding how our minds work and, most importantly, how to control them. More specifically, how to see what pain is and turn it off altogether. I'll do this through the retelling of my experience spending 10 days at a silent meditation retreat. So here it goes. I first started meditating daily in December of 2017. I decided I would commit to a daily regimen for a month just to see if there were any changes in my life. I was dealing with depression at the time and nothing else had really worked up to that point, so I decided, after everything I'd heard about meditating, that I would give it a try. And so I did, and I noticed almost right away the difference in my mood. It was subtle. It was very small, but it was distinct nonetheless. I felt noticeably happier. And as the weeks went by, I started to feel this deeper connection to something, some energy that I couldn't quite understand, but I felt connected to nonetheless. And so as the months went on and that connection went deeper and I started to experience more of what awareness is and what can be accomplished in that space. I think accomplished is the wrong word. What can be experienced in that space? The healing, the progression upwards. Meditation is a language to the universe, and the universe teaches you lessons within that language. And the more you go into meditation, the more you learn how to speak that language. So around May of 2018, I found this meditation retreat that was free. It was a 10-day silent meditation retreat called Vipassana. There's these centers all over the world where you can go for free and usually donate your time, cleaning up afterwards, or give monetary donation. That's how these facilities support themselves. So I found out about this one about 7 hours away from me, and I found a session and I decided to go. Now everyone in my life was quite concerned about this. I come from a very kind of traditional family where we don't meditate. I mean, this Eastern philosophy stuff wasn't something we were exposed to, so I think my parents and my friends and my husband in particular thought it was odd that I would choose to go to a place to be silent for 10 days. I can see why that would be alarming. They thought I was joining a cult or something like that. My mother was very concerned, but I went anyway. And I drove that 7 hours through never-ending prairies. My gosh, I drove for hours with nothing to look at. And my tank was running almost on empty, and then there it was. I see this little village, this haven in the middle of nowhere, with only had a gas station and maybe, half a dozen residential houses, and then this facility in the middle of it. And that's where the Vipassana Center was. I think it was an old converted nursing home or care home of some sort. But the way it was set up was that there were two wings. There was the female wing and the male wing. The only time you saw each other was when you were meditating in the center. But other times you were separate. Even your leisure area, your forest where you got to walk around, that was separate too. So the idea was they wanted to minimize distractions. You are supposed to immerse yourself in the silence, immerse yourself in you. And so more distractions they could minimize, they did. It provided a nice safe environment anyway, to have the males and the females separate. And so the first day I got there, I go in, there's a girl sitting in this little cafeteria area. She checks me in. She asks if I want to volunteer my keys and my phone. Then she just explained that it's just to reduce the chance that you're gonna kind of instantly react to the process that you're going through with this technique. It's not easy. They tell you on the website that this can be a traumatic experience for a lot of people because you're going deep within that meditative state, within your subconscious, to discover what you have hiding there. And so it can be very difficult, and a lot of people leave. In fact, by the end of my session, about half of the people had abandoned it and left. But I had made a promise to myself that I wasn't going to leave. I was going to do it. No matter what I was going through, I was going to stick it out. because I wanted to get to the end. I wanted to see what was there at the end for me. And she assigns me to my room. I go. It's a very standard room. It's just got one really creaky wooden bed and a dresser. I drop my bags, and this feeling of fear all of a sudden comes over me, like, oh shit, here I am. Here now it's real. Now I have to do this for 10 days. And so I walk around the facility, and it's very sterilized. There's nothing to it. There's no decorations. It's very facility-like with no personality. And again, that's intentional. They don't want you attached to this quote-unquote reality. They want you to be able to kind of disappear from the illusion. And so the silence began after dinner that night. We had an orientation. We were instructed on the rules of the facility, and then rang the gong, and then there we were, silent. And we did the first session at about 7 p.m., all of us in the same room together, and they played this video of the, I guess, founder of Vipassana. I forget his name, last name Goenka, I believe. But they played this video. Every night we would be given one of his videos. He would kind of instruct us. That was the only speaking that we heard. So the first night, he just basically introduces us to the method. And in the beginning, the method is you just sit there and you focus on breathing. You focus on the way the air feels going in and out of your nose. Specifically your nose. You want to focus on just that triangle space around your nose. And you spend the first 3 days just focusing on this, just your nose. And so we would meditate for 10 hours a day, not all together, in 2-hour increments. 1 hour was not mandatory. Nothing was mandatory, but if you wanted the full experience, you did what they advised. So we would sit in 2-hour increments. Only 1 hour was really mandatory. After that, you could get up and you could go for a walk. You could go meditate somewhere else. And so we did that for 2-hour increments, total of 10 hours a day. And we would get up at 4:30 a.m. and that would be the first session. And then there would be breakfast, and then the lunch, which was the biggest meal of the day, and then at like a tea time for dinner where you'd get fruit and tea. And then you'd be in bed by 9 p.m. So that was the schedule for every single day. The first day, I did not get up at 4:30 a.m. because that was one of the first voluntary sitting sessions. You didn't have to go to the first one. You could just say you were meditating in your room. And because I was quite lazy, I did not get up for the 4 a.m. seating. I will admit that. I did not do it once. I'm sorry to all the diehards. I tried, but I was still new to this journey, and I didn't quite have my discipline down quite yet. So no, I did not get up for any of the early sessions, but I would get up for, of course, the first mandatory session. So this first session was going to be the longest I'd ever sat meditating. It was going to be an hour. Again, 2 hours was available if you wanted it. I should also explain there were two kind of groups of us. There were the first year students, those who, of course, were just experiencing their first Vipassana, and there were the returning students. The returning students would sit in the front. They were kind of the examples for us. And they were all very stoic in the way they sat. They didn't really move much. You could tell they'd done this before, and they'd figured something out. But the rest of us, the first year students, we kind of shifted a lot as we were learning how to sit without discomfort, or at least enduring the discomfort in order to rise higher. I'll talk about that more later, but they were very calm. You could tell the returning students from the first years. We were kind of a little jittery and nervous, but they just seemed to have something figured out. So we're in the first sitting, and most of us are just kind of shifting around trying to figure out how we're gonna do this. And we just kind of dive in, and there's no clock in the room. It's a very empty room. There was just the women on one side and the men on the other, and there were 2 teachers at the front. Well, I guess kind of 4 teachers. There were the 2 main teachers, a man and a woman, and then 2 kind of like student teachers, a man and a woman. And the 4 of them sat up at the front, and they just kind of modeled what you should do. And all it was just sitting there, and in no particular way, whatever way felt best to you, but sitting there and breathing in silence. And so we all did that. Now, I didn't feel much in my first session because I was more concerned with kind of the pain that was starting to develop. I had never sat for that long before, and so the pain was starting to distract me. And as the day went on, the pain kind of started to creak in a little bit more. It wasn't excruciating, but by the time I had sat for about 6 to 8 hours, it was starting to really become noticeable anyway. So the first few days were kind of like that. It was just focusing on this technique of breathing in through your nose, just focusing on your nose, nothing else. So the first 3 days were pretty much the same. And then the fourth day comes along, and that's the determined sitting. That's where you're supposed to sit there for 2 hours straight and not get up, not move a muscle, just sit in the pain, in the silence, and not buckle. Now, of course, if you move around, you're not going to be slapped by a wooden ruler or something. This is all just advice for your most growth. But I was determined that I was going to do it, needed to do this. And so when I sat down, I found my position, and I committed to not moving an inch. Around the half an hour mark, every time we started meditating was the time when I could start to feel that pain just creaking in there and just starting to gnaw at me. So about 30, 45 minutes, that pain is reaching that max, the max that I had experienced up to that point. But of course, time keeps going, and I reach roughly the hour point. And now I'm not too sure if this is the exact timing, because again, there was no clock in the room. But by my internal clock, it felt like around the hour mark is when it started to reach this kind of, I don't want to say unbearable pain, because I bared it, but it felt like something was burning on the inside of me. And as the time kept going on, it would increase, and then I swear we were getting close to the 2 hour mark, and I was in more pain than I'd ever been in my entire life. It was a pain that I can't even describe. It felt like every inch of me was on fire, or there were needles like shoved into every muscle. It was the most unbearable pain. Yet, here I still am, sitting, not having twitched a muscle, sitting. I can bear it, I can take it. And then something inside of me, in my inner awareness, said to me, where is the pain coming from? And I stopped and I examined my body, and I can feel the pain everywhere. I couldn't quite pinpoint where it was coming from. And then the voice said, is it in your mind? And then I become aware of my mind in this kind of observer way. I felt kind of detached from myself, and I was looking at my mind. I was examining my mind. And then I could find this area within my brain that was just charged up. It was overactivated. It was so stimulated, and I could feel it, but as an observer. And then as soon as I looked at that spot, all the pain stopped. It just instantly evaporated. It was gone. Now, this only lasted for like a second, because as soon as I became aware that the pain was gone, I pulled away and the pain came back. But then I went back in. I did the same thing again, and it lasted a little longer, but then I got pulled out again. And then I just kept doing this dance of going back into where I released the pain simply by observing it in my mind, jumping right back in it when I become aware that it's gone. What I can see from that now is when you focus on the pain, when it is in your abject awareness, it is real. It is more real than anything. But when you're able to let go of it in the part of your mind where it is born, then you can release it all. You just have to stay away from looking at it. You can't go back to it. You can't notice that the pain is gone. You just have to have the pain gone. And that's an incredibly difficult thing to do in waking reality, or just normal reality. Because you have all these other factors that are reminding you of the pain. Your memory of it is enough to pull you back to it. But anyway, I digress. It's in this moment, I could see that the pain was something that I was holding on to. I was allowing to stay trapped in my mind and stimulated in my mind. So the 2 hours comes to an end. And I try to get up, and I can't, because my legs are absolute jelly. I cannot feel them. They are more asleep than they have ever been in my entire life. So I have to sit there for a few minutes, allowing that feeling to come back. And as the feeling is coming back, it hurts. So I'm feeling this energy, this blood flow come back into my legs, and the pain is horrible. But then I decide to practice this thing again, and I do. And I feel the pain, I become aware of it, and I let it go. But I can still feel the tingling, but it's no longer painful. So I am feeling so high. I feel like I've discovered this new thing about existence, that I'm never going to be in pain again, that I've leveled up. I'm superhuman now. I really felt kind of spiritually arrogant. I felt like I was somehow better than everyone. I kind of looked around the room like, I was the one that didn't move. I felt people moving around me all over the place. People were sneezing. Oh, another thing I learned how to do was stop a sneeze. If you just become aware of it before it happens and you just let it go. It's all about letting go. But anyway, I've got this spiritual bravado about me, and I'm just kind of shifting looks around the room, not really getting anybody's attention, more just feeling superior to them. So I make my way back to my room all elated and happy, and I go to bed and I fall asleep within seconds. I was so exhausted but happy. The next day, I wake up. This is day 5 now. And of course, I've still got this arrogance attached to me, and I go to the meditating room and sit down, and I'm expecting that I'm just going to be this Buddha now. I'm just know how to meditate. I'm just going to be excellent at this. But I can't quiet my mind. I'm back to this place where my mind just won't stop. And I just feel so frustrated with myself that why can't I find that silent space within today when yesterday I had such an accomplishment? So I sat there for the whole hour just getting more frustrated with myself. Every moment that I couldn't get back to that magical silent space, I got more frustrated with myself for not getting there. I could feel that inner voice come through. You know, we all know that voice that just beats us down, that's filled with doubt and fear, that voice that prevents us from doing the things we truly want to be doing. You know, that voice, our worst enemy. So that starts coming through and telling me that I'm just an imposter. I don't know what I'm doing. I can't meditate. Who was I to come here to think that I could learn how to do this thing? Oh, it was vicious. And the only way I know how to punish myself in this space, because it's not like I can complain to anybody, so I'm going to punish myself in the only way I can. And I go to lunch, and I fill my plate, and I eat it all. And then I get another plate, and I eat it all. I overindulge, wanting to ingest more than I needed. And so I punish myself by giving myself more than I want to have. But that didn't do the trick, of course. I'm still fuming in my mind. Because deep down, I am a little childish brat sometimes. And that comes through when I'm angry, when I'm frustrated. That little spoiled child comes through. So in my failed attempt to punish myself with the food, I decide to go out for a walk and just be grumpy. Oh, and in my mind, I already have this idea that I'm not going to go to the next session, because what's the point? I was really getting angry at the whole process at this point. I was angry at the world. I was angry at myself. So I go out for a walk because that's the only thing you can do in this place that I was starting to loathe. And I'm walking in the field. It was just me. Everybody else was still at lunch. And I wasn't walking for more than, I would say, 30 seconds when this feeling comes over me, like this wave of wind almost that just blows through me. I have this revelation that goes, oh, I'm doing this to myself. This feeling I'm feeling, this anger, this frustration, this temper tantrum, I'm doing it to myself. I'm choosing it. I don't have to be behaving like this. I could behave any way I want, but I'm choosing this. Why? And then it's like I had this pipeline to ask questions, and they were instantly answered. I asked the question why, and instantly I was shown how I reacted as a child, as a 6-year-old. When I got what I wanted, I was a brat. And so that carried into my adult life. And when I don't get what I want, when I'm frustrated, I revert to that little spoiled brat. And I could see it all so clearly in this gentle breeze that washed through me. That was my first big revelation while there. I saw that I was choosing everything. Well, I guess it wasn't my first big revelation. I learned how to turn off pain. That was pretty big. I could see that everything that I experienced was something I was choosing. My mental state was something I was choosing. And I was choosing every moment, whether I was aware of it or not. When I wasn't aware of it, I was choosing the default, what I had always reverted to. But if I was aware of that decision, I could choose to be peaceful and calm and understanding about this whole thing. I could choose to understand that this is part of the process, that I'm gonna feel on top of the world one moment and then have to fall downward the next. because this process is about learning how to balance in the light and the dark. Now, this is something I didn't know back then, but what was essentially happening was I was raising my frequency or vibration or whatever into this realm where we can control everything with our minds, with our intentions, with our beliefs. And then when I wasn't in that meditative state, because you can't stay there, you have to come back to this life, this experience. And so you fall away from it. And that hurts. That is scary because you want to go back up. You want to go back to that place where you're powerful, where you can stop pain. But if you want to continue to grow, you can't stay there. You have to come back down and experience the layers of you that are still hurting, that need to be healed, that need to be looked at. You have to come and work through it. You can't just wish it away. It's not a part of you, but it is on you. It's like mud that this little beam of light has collected, and your job is to wash it away. But the only way you can do that is by working through it, by feeling it, by grieving with it. So now we enter day 6 of my experience, and I'm starting to feel profound things happening. Before I continue, I have to give you a little flashback. About a year before that, like almost to the day, we had this ant problem in our kitchen. And my solution to the problem was to kill each one of the ants. Every time I came into the kitchen, I'd find about 10 more, and I would take a paper towel and I would squash them all. God, I still feel bad about it to this day. But that's what I would do, and I probably killed a few hundred ants, and then the problem just stopped. So flash forward to a year beyond that, and I'm at the Vipassana. And wouldn't you know it, my room has an ant problem. But one of the vows you take before you enter this retreat is that you vow not to kill anything. You're on a strict vegetarian diet as well, and you vow not to kill insects or anything. And at first when I see the ants, I'm like, oh, screw it, no one will ever know I killed them. That was my first thought. But then I remembered that I'm here for a reason, and I should follow the rules because they are in place for a reason. I want to grow. And so I go and get the little bug catcher that they had laid out for people. It was an old yogurt container and a stiff piece of cardboard. So I get the bug catcher, go back to my room, and I gently scoop about 24 ants or so into this yogurt container, and I take it outside and I release the ants into the wild. Now every time I came back to my room for days after this, I would find 24 ants. And at first it was aggravating. I didn't want to have to do this task of constantly scooping my room of ants and taking them outside. But around the 3rd day or so, I started to enjoy the ants. When I got back to my room, I was happy to see them. They were my little friends, and I talked to them. We weren't allowed to talk to each other, and so I talked to them. And I found myself becoming more compassionate with them, seeing them not as just pests, but as conscious creatures in their own right. So I would enjoy scooping them up, and I would find nice places in the garden to place them. And then one day they just stopped. No more ants, not a single one. And I bet you anything that I saved as many as I killed the year previous. And from this very day, I still do not kill insects. I scoop them up gently and I take them outside. I find a nice place for them. I just can't kill them now after that experience. So there's another thing that happened to me to progress me on the path. And so we're still on day 6, and there's one thing that happened that was extraordinarily distressful to all of us. It was about 3 in the morning that we were awakened by this piercing scream. A scream unlike anything I had ever heard. It was more horrifying than any horror movie scream I'd ever heard. It was this guttural, terrified to the very core of one's existence scream. And it was coming from the men's wing. It woke me up, and of course I didn't know what to do. I knew it was one of the male attendees having probably a nightmare. Of course, it was a nightmare. But I couldn't, of course, go to the men's hall, so I just waited like all the others until the screaming stopped. And the screaming didn't stop for probably 5 minutes, or at least it felt like 5 minutes of just this poor soul in pure agony. And then it stopped. We were told the next day that that individual went home and he was doing much better. But they also explained to us, just in brief, so that we would understand, that this process isn't all progression upward. This can unleash some deep traumatic wounds that when they are looked at, can cause trauma simply by revisiting them. That this process of healing is precarious. But if you have that trauma within you, don't you want to heal it? Wouldn't you want to rise above that, even if it means you have to go through it? I often think of that person, of what happened to him. Did he get better? I hope he did. I hope he was able to find peace from that. But I will never forget that scream. I will never forget it. So on the 7th day, of course, we're all noticeably a little rattled. There's a different energy in the room. There's a bit of tension, maybe fear. But we carry on. Now at this point, we're probably missing about 10 people. I think we started around 45 people. So about 10 people are gone at this point. They just kind of silently disappear. Every now and then you'll get one that stands up in the middle of a session and walks out and never comes back. It's just part of, I guess, how much you can take. Now for me, I wasn't really experiencing anything traumatic. It was more, I was seeing through some very superficial layers of myself. I was starting to see how I thought, how I reacted to the world, and how I treated people, how I treated myself, what I expected from myself. It was all these kind of introductory questions to the path. Who am I? What am I doing here? What's my purpose? So I remember on this 7th day, I was walking through the garden, the forest, just as usual. And I walked by this tree, this great big tree, big, tall limbs. You can tell its roots went deep into the earth. And then there's this other tree beside it, much smaller, like a baby. And as I'm walking by these two trees, I have this voice or feeling within me that says, you're that baby tree, looking up at that big tree, wondering why it isn't there yet. Because at this point, I was getting a little hard on myself too, because I was feeling that I wasn't doing well in the meditations. I felt like, because I still hadn't had an out-of-body experience, I thought I was failing somehow. I wasn't trusting the process. So on this day, at that moment when I had this experience with these trees, Source was telling me, you have to honor your place as that baby tree right now, because that big tree wasn't always that big tree. It was a baby tree too. It had shallow roots. It had short limbs. But now look at it. Now look at it after time has had a chance to allow it to grow. Look at how deep its roots grow now. Look at how tall its limbs reach. Look at how many leaves it has. It's magnificent, but it took time. You will be that tree one day, but for now, honor where you are. And so after this revelation washes over me, I continue my walk, and then I come across another tree. Now this tree was another tall, older tree that had a limb missing. Not missing, just falling down from it. It was still connected to the tree, but it was broken off and it was just hanging there. And as I pass by this tree, I get this feeling inside and this voice that says, now don't you think that tree is better off without a limb that is no longer alive? Because you could tell that that limb had been rotting for quite some time. It was almost black, and it had fallen off. And at first it seemed like a sad thing that that tree had lost its limb. But then on closer inspection, you see that that limb was completely rotten and useless and only holding the tree back. And I had this vision of myself shedding layers that I thought were so vital to who I was. I saw them shedding away, and then me feeling lighter, me being able to grow taller now, because I don't have this dead weight on me. I could see myself so clearly, juxtaposed with this tree. And so another revelation. In the span of like 5 minutes, these trees were teaching me these profound lessons about myself, about letting go, about accepting where I was, about trusting that I am exactly where I need to be. So at this point, I'm starting to feel a lot better. The sessions are starting to become easier. I'm sitting there for longer without fidgeting, without moving, without shifting. So here we are on day 8. Now this is a day of pure delight for me. I'm feeling good on this day. I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling creative. I'm feeling the need to paint. I had never painted before in my life. Minus when I was a kid, we all with our finger paintings, but I had never in my adult life experienced this desire to want to create. I had all these images in my mind of paintings I wanted to do, and I was so excited. I felt this expression within me flowing through that needed to come out, and that of course would be later expressed when I got home. But that was the day my creative fire was unleashed. It was like by accepting and letting go of things about me that I could change. I was given this new way of looking at the world, this way of looking at the world that needed to express itself in some creative way. And at this time too, I'm experiencing more lucid type dreams. I remember this one point, it was probably on date 7 or 8, where I go and take a nap. And as I'm drifting into my nap, it's like I am sinking consciously in through my bed, and I can see one of the student teachers there looking up at me. She's standing down below and she's looking up at me with this smile that seems to radiate from within her. And she's welcoming me through, like encouraging me. Come on, yeah, you can do it. And so as I focus on her, I sink into the dream, but then something pulls me back out, like I become awake again. I get pulled back into my bedroom, out through the bed. But then I go right back in, and then I do this several times, probably half a dozen times, this sinking into the dream, aware, and there she is encouraging me through, and then falling back out of it. And I kept doing this, and that was probably my first introduction to what a lucid dream can be like, where you're conscious, but you're shifting into this hyper-aware dream state where you have more power, it seems. You come back to this, again, quote-unquote reality, and you don't feel like you have quite as much power as you do on that lucid plane state. So I was starting to feel the shift as we moved towards the end of the retreat, towards day 10. I was definitely feeling more awake and aware and alive and excited and creative. There was something that was growing in me that I knew I was going to express. I just had no clue how. This was at the very beginning of my creative journey. This was before everything, before I had any idea what to do. But I felt this force that was going to be expressed in the world. I was so excited to get home. I was shaking. I was so excited. So on the final day, we did this meditation where we just focused on gratitude and love, and it was kind of like a healing tonic to end the retreat. And it really did make a difference. It kind of like cemented the love, this new brewing love in your heart. So when I left on that drive home, I felt nothing but love. When someone cut me off in traffic, I just sent love their way. I was just this beam of happiness. The whole ride home was something out of a dream. I felt like I was in a dream, like I had discovered some secret, and now here I was able to be this angelic person almost. Now when I got back home to my routine, to the people, to everything, my job, all that stuff, I could start to feel that feeling diminish. I could always summon it when I went back into meditation. Whenever I meditate, there I am, right there, back home. But during the intervening hours, it can be difficult to stay in that state. I often find myself waffling. I am by no means perfect, but I did develop some tools to help me get back up when I've fallen down into the darkness. And I never would have gotten that without that Vipassana retreat. 10 days of silence shows you who you are. It shows you what is lying within you, waiting to be discovered, waiting just for you to listen to it and see that there is magic within you, and whatever you choose to call that magic, be it consciousness, God, higher intelligence, it doesn't matter. There is something in you that is trying to get your attention. It is trying to help you heal. And if you are silent long enough, you will finally be able to hear it. So I hope this was helpful to you, me sharing this experience. I've wanted to share it for a while, and now just feels like the right time. So I hope you got some value out of it. And if you did, try to give this video or podcast a like, follow me, subscribe, all the things. And until next time, I wish you light, love, and harmony. Thank you for joining me.